Beneath the fading sunset on the back porch of her Cape Cod-style home in Asheville, North Carolina, Alice Harper, 70, a retired elementary school teacher, sat quietly, clutching a cold cup of tea. The house, where she and her late husband Henry once danced under moonlight, now echoed with the laughter of her son David, daughter-in-law Sarah, and their 2 grandchildren. But none of it was for her. Alice had opened her doors to them, only to find herself relegated to a tiny guest room, a mere shadow. One fall evening she fell on the wooden staircase, her back searing with pain, calling out in desperation. No one came. The TV drowned her voice just a few steps away. That night, a fire ignited within Alice. She would reclaim her home and herself, even if it meant confronting her entire family. Alice Harper was once a beacon in the classroom, teaching children to read adventure stories and draw dreams with colored chalk. For 35 years, she stood before a blackboard, her voice gentle yet firm, guiding hundreds of students through pages of books. The Cape Cod house in Asheville, with its sloped roof and sun-drenched back porch, was the reward she and Henry gave themselves after years of hard work. They chose every floorboard, planted a red maple in the front yard, and laughed as they painted the living room a soft blue. Henry called it the color of hope. When he died of a heart attack 6 years ago, the house fell silent, as if it too were grieving. Alice tried to fill the void with gardening, reading, and joining the local garden club, but loneliness seeped through the cracks in the walls. Everything changed when David, her only son, called. He'd lost his job as a software engineer after his startup collapsed. "Just a few months, Mom," David said, his voice a mix of hope and anxiety. He, Sarah, and their young kids, Emma and Noah, needed a place to stay. Alice didn't hesitate. That's what mothers do, she thought, imagining family dinners, children's laughter, and bedtime stories. She cleared out the master bedroom with its big window overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains and moved into a small guest room near the garage, barely big enough for a single bed and an old desk. She folded her favorite curtains, stored her porcelain teapot, and handed the kitchen to Sarah, who preferred takeout over cooking. But the dream of a warm, connected household quickly faded. David and Sarah took over the house, not with words, but through careless, cutting actions. The master bedroom, where Alice once woke to shimmering sunrises, was cluttered with Sarah's jewelry boxes, scattered clothes, and a new rug Alice hadn't chosen. Her tiny room near the garage felt like a storage closet, its bare walls and lone bulb a harsh contrast to the home's former warmth. Her beloved teapot, a wedding gift from Henry, was shoved to a high shelf, replaced by Sarah's noisy coffee machine. The kitchen, where Alice once baked blueberry pies for neighbors, became a mess of takeout containers and pizza boxes. She tried cooking for the family, setting the table with her mother's linen, but Sarah brushed it off, saying the kids liked chicken nuggets. Alice stopped trying. She ate alone, soup or toast, while laughter and clinking plates drifted from the living room where the family gathered without her. Emma and Noah, who once begged for her classroom stories, now barely looked up from their screens. "Hi, Grandma," was a rare mumble, given only when prompted. David, consumed by job applications and calls, promised things will get better without meeting her eyes. Sarah, with brisk efficiency, reorganized the pantry, tossing Alice's chamomile tea because no one drinks that. Alice felt herself fading, her voice unheard, her steps unnoticed. On the back porch, watching the sunset gild the Blue Ridge Mountains, she wondered when she'd become a stranger in her own home. They planned vacations, discussed new furniture, even talked of repainting the house, never mentioning her. They weren't cruel, just thoughtless, treating Alice like the creaky floorboards or the old oak outside, expected to stay quiet and still. Her heart ached, not with anger, but with a quiet sorrow for the life she'd lost within these walls. One crisp fall evening, as a chill slipped through the window, Alice descended the wooden staircase, an old book in hand, Her foot caught on a loose rug and she fell, her back slamming against the floor, a few steps from the ground. Pain tore through her, sharp as a blade. She called out, her voice frail, "David!" "Sarah?" But only laughter from the living room, a few yards away, answered, drowned by a blaring sitcom. She lay there, breath ragged, waiting. No one came. 5 minutes, then 10 passed, marked only by the ticking wall clock. Alice crawled to a nearby armchair, hands trembling as she gripped its edge, pulling herself up, her back screaming. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes wet, not from physical pain, but from the realization that she could vanish and her family wouldn't notice. The next morning, Sarah breezed by, noting Alice looked tired, but asking nothing more. David was glued to his phone. Emma and Noah darted past, oblivious to her limp. On the porch, clutching her tea, Alice watched red maple leaves fall, and something broke inside her. Not anger, but clarity. She couldn't live as a ghost in the home she and Henry built. That night, she opened an old notebook and wrote, "Alice, who made classrooms laugh, where are you?" Those words, like a small flame, sparked her resolve to change. Alice's journey to reclaim herself began in quiet, meaningful moments. Each morning, she rose before dawn, brewing chamomile tea in the porcelain pot she'd quietly retrieved from a high shelf. She sat by the living room window, where the first light streamed in, writing in her notebook fragments of memory. She wrote of teaching days, when students cheered for her stories, or evenings slow dancing with Henry on the back porch to bluegrass from an old radio. The words weren't just memories, they were proof she'd lived vibrantly and could again. One rainy afternoon, Alice rummaged through the basement, past Sarah's cluttered boxes, and found a small wooden box, dust thick as a coat. Inside were Henry's love letters, his scrawled, warm words about their shared dream of this house. She sat in the cold basement, clutching the letters, tears streaming. They reminded her she wasn't just a mother or grandmother, but Alice, a woman who once dreamed big. She started walking the neighborhood daily, slow loops through oak-lined streets, far enough to ease her back. Strangers nodded, an old man waved from his porch, and these small moments made her feel seen. Alice carried her notebook, jotting down details, birdsong in the maples, sunlight through leaves, the scent of rain-soaked earth. She wrote of loneliness, but also hope, of the woman she wanted to be again. At home, she skipped the family's noisy dinners, eating alone on the porch with a salad or toast, listening to the wind's stories. She stopped waiting for David or Sarah's invitations or glances from Emma and Noah. Instead, she found joy in private acts, reorganizing her bookshelf, polishing Henry's old photo frame, or wearing the pearl earrings she once loved. Alice swapped gray sweaters for bright ones, shedding the instinct to fade into the background. Each small step rebuilt her, brick by brick. She told no one of these changes, but inside, she knew a bigger shift was coming. For the first time in years, Alice felt not just alive, but living. And she wouldn't let anyone take that away. Alice's resolve to change burned like a steady, quiet flame. One early morning, as mist clung to the Blue Ridge Mountains, she mustered the courage to call Ellen, a lawyer from her garden club. Ellen had helped her and Henry draft their will, and her warm voice eased Alice's nerves. Over the phone, Alice shared her situation briefly, her son and daughter-in-law overtaking the house, her invisibility, and the painful fall no one noticed. Ellen listened, then suggested a meeting. Alice prepared a canvas bag, carefully packing papers from an old drawer, the house deed, insurance contract, and tax receipts. The deed, bearing her and Henry's signatures from 2 decades ago, proved her ownership, and after Henry's death, only her name remained. She read those lines repeatedly, the faded ink still clear, a reminder of the strength she once had. Alice visited Ellen's office, a short drive away, feeling both nervous and confident. Ellen explained her rights. She could demand the family leave, provided she followed legal steps. Alice took meticulous notes, from issuing a 30-day notice to transferring utility bills. She didn't want arguments or revenge, just to reclaim what was hers. Back home, she hid the papers in a locked drawer, the key on a chain around her neck. She began acting quietly, checking bills, noting services in her name, planning each step. David and Sarah, oblivious, laughed in the living room steps away. But Alice was no longer a shadow. Every word she wrote, every call she made was a step toward freedom. She knew soon this house would bear her mark again, as it had when Henry was alive. Alice continued her preparations in silence, each action a stone in the new foundation of her life. She woke early, the house still dark, brewing tea and sitting by the window, reviewing Ellen's notes. She organized papers into neat files, the deed, bills, and a copy of the lawyer's letter, all locked in a drawer, the key always on her. Alice stopped paying for the family's services, like Wi-Fi or cable, which she'd quietly covered. When Sarah complained about slow internet, Alice shrugged, claiming ignorance, and walked away. She skipped their casual pizza nights, refusing David's half-hearted invites. Instead, she cooked vegetable soup for herself, eating on the back porch, listening to the wind through the maples. David and Sarah, caught up in their lives, didn't notice her withdrawal. Emma and Noah rushed by, unaware she was noting electric bills or checking the home insurance. Alice called the county office to confirm the deed's validity, unchanged since Henry's death. The cheerful clerk verified her sole ownership, making her smile for the first time in weeks. She scheduled a notary visit to update documents, carrying her old canvas bag, walking taller. In the small office, smelling of ink and old paper, she signed her name, the strokes bold as if rewriting her story. Back home, she printed extra copies, labeled each file, and stored them safely. The family remained oblivious. David planning to remodel the living room, Sarah leaving shoes strewn about, but Alice was done caring. She walked the neighborhood, admiring lit-up homes, and wrote in her notebook, "I don't need them to see me. I see myself." Each step, each signature declared she was no longer invisible. She didn't rush, didn't let emotions steer her, but inside, she knew she was building a boundary no one could cross. The house and Alice would soon be hers again. One Sunday morning, as winter's first light slipped through the window, Alice knew the time had come. She brewed tea, sat at the kitchen table, once the heart of family meals, now just a memory. From the locked drawer, she retrieved her prepared papers: the house deed, Ellen's letter, and a 30-day notice for David, Sarah, and the kids to leave. Each document, with its notarized signatures, was proof of her ownership and will. When David and Sarah returned from the store, still joking carelessly, Alice called them to the kitchen. She laid the papers on the table, her voice calm but sharp, like when she'd call students to read aloud. "This is my house," she said, pointing to the deed. "You have 30 days to find a new place." David froze, mouth open, speechless. Sarah flipped through the papers, eyes darting, searching for a flaw, her face paling. "Mom, why would you do this?" Sarah asked, voice trembling. Alice didn't argue. She met their eyes, steady, as if seeing through years of being overlooked. "I need this house for myself," she said, then stood, leaving them with the truth on the table. No big fight, no tears, just heavy silence, the first time the family saw Alice as more than a shadow. She returned to her room, closed the door, and opened her notebook, writing, "Today I spoke, and they heard." Emma and Noah, too young to grasp it, still ran through the house, but David and Sarah whispered, poring over the papers, eyes wide with worry. Alice felt no triumph, only relief. She'd drawn a line not with shouts but with ink and paper, with the resolve of a woman who once taught kids to stand tall. She knew from now on everything would change. The transition unfolded in a hushed tension, like the calm before a storm. David avoided Alice, no longer working at the kitchen table, instead retreating to the bedroom or front porch, phone pressed to his ear inquiring about rentals. Sarah wavered between silence and clumsy attempts to mend things, once suggesting they cook dinner together, but Alice gave a faint smile, declining softly. She wasn't angry, but she didn't need belated reconciliation. Emma and Noah, sensing the shift, still asked her about homework or where toys were, and Alice answered briefly, her tone kind but distant. She didn't want to hurt the kids, but she was done being an unseen caretaker. The family began packing, cardboard boxes piling up in the hallway, filled with clothes, toys, and items they'd brought without her consent. Sarah cleared her bookshelves. David canceled the grocery delivery Alice had funded. They didn't argue, perhaps knowing the kitchen table papers were an undeniable truth. Meanwhile, Alice reclaimed her space, step by deliberate step. She moved her favorite floral armchair to the living room window, where morning light poured in. She dusted the bookshelf, arranging novels she'd left unread, a reminder she still had time. She played the old radio, bluegrass tunes Henry loved, filling corners once drowned by TV noise. The house shifted quietly but unmistakably, becoming hers again. Alice walked more, passing glowing neighbor homes, and wrote in her notebook, I don't need their approval. I just need to be me. She overheard David on calls about a new apartment, Sarah printing rental listings, and knew they were scrambling, but had time. 30 days was fair. Alice felt no guilt. She'd given them so much, and now she was keeping what was hers. Each day, she stood taller, spoke clearer, as if teaching herself to live again. The house, once stifled by indifference, began to breathe in sync with her. The day the family left, Alice stood behind the upstairs curtain watching silently. No drama, no tearful goodbyes, just the sound of cardboard boxes being lifted, footsteps on the stairs, and finally the car engine fading into the distance. She waited until the taillights vanished, then descended, closing the front door, feeling the stillness settle. The house exhaled, free of indifference's clamor. Alice returned to the master bedroom, clearing out Sarah's things, spreading the soft blue sheets Henry had picked. She hung new linen curtains, letting sunlight flood in, and set a lavender pot on the sill. She cooked a pot roast, its aroma filling the air, and set the table for one with old porcelain plates and a glass of wine. Bluegrass played on the radio, and she ate slowly, savoring each bite, not for hunger, but for freedom. After dinner, she cleaned the kitchen, wiping the counter, relishing the joy of simple tasks now hers alone. Alice planted daisies in the garden, digging into frost-hardened soil, preparing for spring. She joined a painting class at the community center, laughing more, chatting with new friends. The house became her own, every corner stamped with Alice. Bookshelves organized, her paintings on the walls, chamomile tea scent in the air. She wrote in her notebook, "This is my home, and I am Alice." No TV drowned her voice, no hurried footsteps of others. Just her, with sunlight streaming through the window, and the joy of being herself. Alice gazed at the Blue Ridge Mountains, smiling, knowing she'd reclaimed not just her home, but her heart. At journey's end, Alice Harper stood firm in her Cape Cod home, not just its owner on paper, but its soul. She began each day with chamomile tea, sitting on the back porch, watching dawn paint the Blue Ridge Mountains pink. The house, once choked by indifference, now brimmed with her light and breath. Alice cleared the last traces of David and Sarah, donating items that weren't hers. Sarah's gaudy rug, the kids' plastic dishes, to replace them with her own. A cream wool rug, a painting she made of the front yard's maple. She started a painting class at the community center, sharing tales of her teaching days, making folks laugh. New friends, like Claire from the garden club, dropped by, sipping tea on the porch, talking daisies and dreams of old age. Alice tended her garden with care, planting lavender and yellow daisies, each bed a reminder of renewal. She cooked for love, trying Henry's favorite butter cookie recipe, their scent filling the kitchen. She wrote letters to herself, her notebook's words no longer sad memories, but vows to live fully. "Alice, you did it," she wrote, smiling. The house was no longer someone else's shelter. It was her haven, her store. She hung old photos of her and Henry, dusting the frames, placing them on the bookshelf, honoring the past without being bound by it. Each evening, Alice sat in her armchair, bluegrass playing, reading novels, or sketching distant mountains. She no longer feared solitude. Silence was her friend, a space to grow. The house, with its soft blue walls, testified to her strength. A 70-year-old woman, once forgotten, now standing tall, living true to herself. Alice looked out the window, moonlight on the maple, and knew, for the first time in years, she was truly home, wholly her own.